A couple things. So I like to use clay that, like I was saying, fits into the palm of my hand. When you're making a pinch pot, you can kind of imagine how I made this, right? It sits in one hand while you squeeze it and pinch it and kind of form it into this form. And so that's essentially what we're going to do with this really, really wet clay. So to start off with, we're going to make a ball of clay. I like to just kind of hit it back and forth. I'm just using this, the cup of my hand to kind of create that shape. But you could also roll it on the table if you need to, or hit it on the table if you're having trouble kind of hitting it back and forth, or if it's hurting your wrists or anything like that. Just do what's right for you to get a ball of clay. So now I have this kind of smaller than a baseball size ball of clay. And we're going to start pinching it. So to start, I'm going to go ahead and stick my thumb all the way in. Not all the way through, but just in, I would say you want to leave about ½ inch, ¼ inch at the bottom. You don't want it to be too thin down in there. So if you see that, it's a very simple little hole I just made. And then we're going to start pinching. So when I start to pinch, I really, the movement, or like the idea of pinching, you kind of think about this with your fingers, but really we're just doing like more of a duck quack face or quack mouth, I don't know. But that, you're going to be pinching the clay between this part of your thumb and these flat part of your palm, so that you aren't getting a lot of little fingertip marks. You're actually moving the clay a little bit more if you pinch it this way. And so we're going to start way down here at the bottom, and I'm going to do a pinch, and then I'm going to turn it, and then pinch it and turn it. And I'm holding it in my left hand and pinching with my dominant hand, which is my right hand for me. For you, it may be different. You might need to hold it this way and pinch it. I can't try that right now because I will mess it up. But we're going to do that all the way around at the lowest level, kind of the base of the pot, and then we'll slowly work our way up through these thicker areas. So I'm going to find this next, pause, the phone's ringing. Okay, so I'm going to find this next, like kind of move up into this next thicker area, and then I'm going to pinch it, turn it, pinch it, turn it, pinch it, turn it, pinch it, turn it, pinch it, turn it. And so you kind of work your way around each little kind of ring of, and work your way up through these kind of thicker areas. So if you look at it, it looks very similar to how it did in the beginning, but down in here is thin, and this area is still thick. So I'm going to keep going. A couple things to keep in mind is that as I'm doing this, I'm really thinking about the position of my hand and keeping this kind of almost perpendicular the way I'm turning it, because I really want to make sure, sorry I got a little high there with this, but I really want to make sure that I'm not just making a big flat pancake, which is something that happens pretty easily with people when they're first learning and playing with clay, because this is super flexible. So you have to have a little bit of control in the way that you're manipulating it. If I turn my hand out like this, then I will start to get wider and wider. So I'm really focusing on keeping my hands kind of curved in almost as I go. So I just keep moving around. You can see I'm going fairly quickly, which you can do once you've done this a few times. I do this a lot. I like making pinch pots. A little crack happening, that's just because maybe I didn't have a perfect ball. I had like a little seam. So I'm just going to actually kind of blend that back together right there. And this one, you can see that one's starting to happen too, because the clay is stretching. And that's one thing I love about it, is it gets this beautiful stretch texture. If you want to smooth your clay, some people do, you can. I recommend taking it, if you're going to take any kind of sponge to it, it's going to be a very, very almost dry sponge, like not very wet at all. We don't really want to add water to this. At this point, this clay is still super soft, so we can use different things like a metal rib or something, or a little lightly damp sponge to try and smooth it more if you want to. Personally, I like the cracking. I think it's one of the things that makes clay look really really beautiful is when clay just looks very natural to me. So I'm going to go ahead and keep pinching. You can see right now I haven't pinched through the rim or the lip, as we call it, on this piece yet. I can thin this down a lot more. I haven't done it yet because that's one of the last things I'll do, just because I like to be a little more intentional and make sure I know kind of what direction and how I'm finishing off the piece. So in this case, I'm actually going to flip my fingers and put my fingers on the inside, my thumb on the outside. And what that does is it gives me just a little more control to like bring that lip in. I like to have a really closed form, as you can kind of see by these examples that I showed you. This is just my style of a little pinch pot. I looked up, right before I did this, I actually looked up how old the oldest pinch pot is, and it's 17,000 years old, which is pretty old. The first pinch pot that they have evidence of. And so you can imagine that this technique has been going on for that many thousands of years, and probably even before that, because that's the oldest one they found, which doesn't mean that's the oldest one there is. So I kind of closed it in just a little bit. I'm going to round it. At this point, it's still super floppy. I want you to see this. So you got to be kind of gentle with it, the way it moves. So I'm cradling it, a lot. As I'm holding it with two hands. I'm not just going to pick it up by the rim or anything like that. But what I can do is either I can just hit it down flat on the table if I want it to be flat, like this one I did that earlier, where I just kind of pushed it down and now it's a little wobbly, it sits. You could also add a foot or a ring like this one. This one is an added ring. This one is one where I just kind of pinched out a little foot to try and make it a little more stable. A foot is going to be oftentimes a little more stable than just a flat spot, only because the way clay dries, it can kind of warp a little bit. This could round out a little more as it gets fired and dries. So I'll just quickly show you how to add a little ring of clay, and then we'll be all set. So I'm just going to pretty much just kind of do a little line here where I'm going to add this clay, and I just scratch it I'm scoring it technically, scratching it up with my needle tool. This clay is super fresh, so technically you really wouldn't need to add like water or slip. Slip is kind of a liquid clay that we use that is glue almost, like the way we glue pieces together. It really helps add a certain type of bond. But pretty much what we're doing is we're adding this kind of texture so that the clay will grip each other. So like instead of trying to add clay like this, we're gonna loosen it up and add it like this. And I'm just gonna I'm gonna grab a tiny little piece of clay from here. I don't really need my tool for that. And I'm gonna roll this out on the table. And you can see I have this little ring of clay. I'm just going to go ahead and scratch it up just a little bit. Like I said, when the clay's really fresh like this, you're going to learn that a lot of times you do have to really score it, really slip it and all that stuff. But when it's really, really plastic, really fresh, you have a little bit of leeway. I'm going to add just a tiny bit of water because I don't want to get all of this wet. It'll get really messy if I do. And then I'll just put that on there. And that's not done yet because now you can still see there's like a little crack here, if you can see this. You need to make sure that you blend all of this together. If you can see like a dark kind of shadow in the crease, that means that it's not really bonded yet. So you need to blend it, or I think in some cases people say slip, score, and smooth. Those are like the 3 S's of joining clay. So you can see I'm just kind of blending it together. You can use your fingers, you can use a little tool. I like using this kind of tool to do it. You can just really get in there and it has this nice little flat area.